Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Tuesday Talks. My name is Kim Riley, and I am the founder and executive director of the Transition Academy. We are a disability college and career planning center. And today we are going to have a presentation on the state of special education in Kansas City Public Schools and charter schools during COVID. As we all know, this is a very trying time, and our population, who has been historically disenfranchised, has been impacted in a way that is different from their peers. And we thought it best to check in with educators and parents and family members of students with IEPs and 504 plans to find out how they're faring, their needs, their experiences, so that we can work together to move forward. We wanted to make sure that we follow the disability community's adage of nothing about me without me. So we went straight to the front lines to hear from those directly impacted. I would like to turn the mic over to my amazing colleague and friend, Andrea Bradley Ewing of Children's Mercy Hospital. She is a researcher and she has facilitated both the survey and the focus groups, and she will share some of the insights and lessons learned. Take it away, Andrea.
All right, thank you, Kim. So I'm Andrea Bradley Ewing with Children's Mercy, and it was just really a pleasure to be a part of this project and learn from parents and teachers how the pandemic has impacted them both academically and then also socially. And so I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to take a look at some of what we've learned from the quantitative surveys that parents and teachers completed, as well as the focus group discussion. All right, so just as Kim mentioned previously, we know that coronavirus has really impacted all of our daily lives, from all of our meetings now being virtual to just really impacting the way students learn, the way families are assisting their students in the learning process, as well as how teachers teach. And we know that students with developmental disabilities are at increased risk for adverse impacts related to school closures and limited access to social and professional services. So this project really assessed how COVID was impacting teachers and parents in Kansas City, Missouri public schools and charter schools. So the participants in this project included 36 parents of children with a special education need, as well as 36 teachers from KCPS and charter schools. We did both an online survey and a focus group. The online survey collected information including demographics, information about students' specific educational needs, parent satisfaction with their child's IEP or 504 plan, remote instruction, some of the resources that have been made available to them during remote learning, as well as the impact of school closure, not only on the student, but also on the parents and the family. All right, so now we're just going to dive into the results for the parent survey. And feel free, if you have any questions as I'm going through some of these results, please feel free to put a question or comment in the chat box. And that way we'll make sure that we get to it later. All right, so for the parents that were surveyed, most of them were parents to students that were between the ages of 5 and 9 years old. And just a small percentage, 5.7%, had children that were over the age of 18. With respect to school type, this was something that was really interesting. 64% of the respondents were parents whose students attended charter schools in the area. 14% were parents of students who attended a school in the Kansas City Public School District. And then there were 22% of parents who were not in the Kansas City, Missouri school district. And as we've talked about, this was something that was of interest to parents outside of the school district and some of the suburban schools, kind of really get an understanding of how COVID is impacting their students. As far as the student diagnosis, there was a range of diagnoses, with the most common being attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. The second most common was learning disability, and third, autism spectrum disorder. There were 20% who really had no diagnosis, and then other diagnoses included an intellectual disability, being blind or visually impaired, or others, which was speech disorder or Down syndrome. So one of the things that we wanted to gauge from parents was how well the school was meeting their child's educational needs. And most parents, more than half of the parents indicated that schools were either doing very well or fairly well in meeting the educational needs of their child. There were 11% who indicated the school was not meeting their child's educational needs at all. And these respondents tended to be children with more progressive learning or developmental disabilities. All right. All right, the other question that we asked parents was, how much time is your student spending in remote instruction? And 14% of parents indicated there was no daily remote instruction for their student, with 19% indicating less than an hour. But 31%, which was the largest kind of group for this question, indicated their child was spending more than 3 hours in remote instruction time with their teacher. When we contrast this with how much time students were spending in remote instruction with their support team, there were only 6% who were spending more than 3 hours. Most were either having no daily instruction or spending less than 1 hour a day with their support team. And these were people like your child's speech therapist or counselors or special education teachers. By and large, most parents were satisfied with remote instruction. We asked parents, is remote instruction time sufficient to meet their child's needs? And you can see 57% indicated yes, 43% no. And the other question we wanted to ask, because this was a concern of many teachers and many administrators, particularly when we realized that remote learning would be sort of the norm for now, is access to sufficient technological resources. And so you can see that most parents and students have access to technological resources. However, there's 26% that did not. And for some of those responses, parents indicated maybe they had multiple children, and so having enough devices for each child was a problem. And some schools have provided things like Chromebooks or tablets for students to work on, and others had not. We also asked about the impact of school closure on their special education student. And most parents, there were really 3 issues that kind of surfaced to the top. The first one being decline in social skills. Many parents indicated the child's inability to interact with peers was really having a negative impact on their social skills. The other 2 included academic decline and emotional distress. Parents indicated their child they notice their child is more stressed, that if there's a problem with a link not working or the child not being able to access the information they need, that creates a lot of frustration and a lot of stress. And we also just kind of asked parents kind of to just provide some open-ended kind of responses. And here are a couple of quotes extracted from parents, and also on the left side, some themes that surfaced during our discussion. And those included things like social isolation, lack of motivation. Some parents noted that their child is less motivated in an online learning format than they are in in-person school. Some of that included maybe that the child's video game console or their iPad is close by, and so keeping their focus was a little challenging. Others indicated limited support services. That was expressed by 14% of parents. Academic and behavioral regression, stress, depression and anxiety, and then also difficulty with the virtual format. So those would be things like I'm running into technological issues. I'm sure all of us have probably had that happen where your your internet is slow or something happens and you're not able to connect to your online meet. One parent indicated, their child just can't attend therapies because of COVID, and just kind of noticing that everything went down from that, and they were working with a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, and a feeding therapist, and all of that has really stopped since the pandemic. We also wanted to get some insight into really how parents were coping with school closure and how it was impacting their daily lives. And most parents indicated just increased stress and feeling overwhelmed. That was expressed by 74% of the parents. Just um, one of the things that we heard is that some parents are working from home, and so they are balancing working from home while trying to help their child with their schoolwork or answer questions that they have during the day. Other parents indicated, I didn't go to college for this. I'm not a trained teacher. I wasn't really prepared. And so, or math has changed so much since I was in school, so I don't really know how to help my child. And 49% indicated inability or reduced ability to work, and 57% increased worry about well-being. We asked parents about their confidence to support their students learning at home, and there were some, 23% had high confidence, 43% moderate confidence. There were 3% who really had no confidence. And so that might be just kind of an opportunity to kind of help parents get the resources that they need to really help their child. Okay. We asked parents also about what support has been most helpful for them. And overwhelmingly, parents agree that direct instruction support from their child's teacher has been most helpful. And just many mentioned that, the teachers have really stepped up and gone above and beyond the typical call of duty, sometimes taking, emails, responding to emails at 7 o'clock at night, or taking phone calls, or just reaching out to students on weekends to ensure that they're learning and their work is getting done. Other things included apps and online materials, communication tools, engagement with others, and also print materials have been helpful. So we asked parents just to rate their overall satisfaction with the support from the school. Most parents were either very satisfied or satisfied. And then 17% of parents who indicated they were not very satisfied or not satisfied at all. And when we asked parents, so what types of support are needed that you don't have access to or that you wish there were more of? There were a few things that kind of surfaced to the top, and those are in bold here. But parents, were just really adamant that opportunities for their students to engage with peers, as well as opportunities for parents to really engage with other parents was really critical. Most of them felt like their child, especially parents who had only children, that their child was really missing out on opportunities to connect with their peers. Many sports teams had been canceled, many other social activities are not available, and so they really thought that was a huge need. Educational apps and online resources for students and for parents, educational materials that are printed, and then also communication support. Other things that were mentioned included, again, access to therapies, behavior specialists, speech therapies, school counselors, and psychologists. One parent, there's a couple of quotes from parents here. And you can just see how amazing they felt that the teachers are, and teachers are really trying to encourage students, but just, having more support and having more resources to figure out what their student needs is helpful. In the focus group discussions, we typically ask, we kind of focus on, what are some of the problems? What are some of the issues that you're facing? But then we also want to turn it into, so what are the solutions? Like if you could, I call it the magic wand question. If you could wave a magic wand and improve things, what would you do like next week? And parents were really split on this. So we had a lot of diverse opinions here. Some parents thought opening up schools for students with 504s and IEP plans, so that they can have access to a lot of the therapies that they have not been able to access since schools have been closed. Getting more information about those 504 plans, kind of tweaking those for a virtual format. All of the parents in our focus group had indicated they had not received a revised 504 plan that they could really adapt for this new online learning environment. Keeping human interactions between students and school. So parents mentioned, how much their children miss things like band and music and PE and recess, and group projects like art projects and science experiments. And so one of the suggested strategies was really kind of creating opportunities for academic work in teams. So the idea of maybe having teachers or art supplies dropped off to students, or science experiments dropped off to students' homes, so that they can kind of work tangibly as opposed to looking at a computer screen all day. Other parents mentioned just how much their child misses the interaction that they had not only with their peers but with their teachers at school. One parent indicated that her child is used to interacting with 4 to 5 staff members, and these are people like the person at the front office. It's the cafeteria personnel. It's the school janitors. It's all of those people in a traditional school environment that have an impact on a child's life. All right, so before we go to kind of what we learned from teachers, are there any questions or comments about the feedback from parents? All right, well, we will just dive right on into the results from the teacher survey. So again, we collected demographic information from teachers. 89% of the respondents were female. Um, Most were between the ages of 30 to 49 years old, and then 81% identified as white. 17% were Black or African American, and 3% were Asian or Pacific Islander. Okay, so much like we saw with parents, where the vast majority of parents who responded were from charter schools, we see the same with teachers. 86% of the respondents were from charter schools, and 14% were from KCPS schools. And there was just a diverse grade levels that were represented. Most were either combined or elementary educators, and a small portion were middle and high school educators. So one of the things we wanted to get from teachers is kind of, what is teaching like pre and post pandemic? So we asked teachers how much time is spent on instruction and professional development since the pandemic. And more than 50% indicated that either somewhat more or much more time was being spent. And here you can see in professional development, teachers are spending more time and somewhat more. And then also with teaching, you can see that in some cases there's somewhat less time that's spent on teaching, and we can talk about maybe why that's the case, and as well as professional development. We also asked teachers to indicate sort of pre and post pandemic, how much time are you spending reaching out to parents as well as students? And as you can see, 69% of teachers are spending much more time than before reaching out to parents, and 58% are spending much more time reaching out to students. And so that might explain why some of the teachers were spending maybe less time in actual education and instruction because they're spending so much time reaching out to parents and students. And when we asked teachers to indicate what were their top concerns about their students, 69% indicated academic decline. There were some teachers who had indicated that on some days, they had less than 50% of students log into their online classes. So that was a concern. That are they completing the material? Are they understanding the material? Are they getting the help that they need? Social emotional health issues was another. And just teachers were overwhelmingly concerned about what's happening with their students. They can't see them on a daily basis as they're used to. So things of how is their home life? Are they eating, every day? Do they have the technology that they need? Do they have the support that they need? Behavior issues was another, as well as physical health issues. And then 6% of teachers had no concerns. So here were some themes that kind of rose to the top, and some of these I've already alluded to. Again, lack of access to high-speed internet, um, technology, low student engagement. Do students have a quiet place to study? Is there an adult family member there who's able to help them if they need it? And then also, how are the students able to focus, during the pandemic with so many, worries and concerns, and some students, being impacted by coronavirus? How are they able to focus? And so this is a comment from one of the teachers, and I thought this was really, really profound. And it really just kind of just highlights again, the important role that school plays in so many students' lives, and just really the concern that goes beyond, what happens in the classroom that teachers have for their students. Okay. We asked teachers, for themselves, what are some of their concerns about returning to school? That was, one of the strategies that parents had indicated would significantly help. But some of the concerns that teachers had were unrealistic expectations. What is expected this year has been, it seems like nonstop transitions for all of us. And so kind of going back into the classroom, knowing what are they expected to do, what should they expect from their students, what kind of support should they expect from administrators, all of those things kind of fit into that category. Others were worried about social emotional health as well as their physical health. Just kind of watching the news and hearing reports, teachers shared, that some schools are like not, they don't have enough teachers because teachers are quarantined or they've been exposed to coronavirus. And so what happens to them physically and socially if they return? Receiving adequate professional development. Some teachers were also worried about layoffs and budget cuts. We can see that many students and many families are opting for private school education as opposed to public education. So what does that mean? What does that look like? And then 11% of teachers had no concerns. And we asked teachers to indicate sort of what were the sources of support that they've received during this virtual learning process, and um, how would you kind of rate the amount of support that you've received? And it's really interesting because teachers are receiving a great deal of support. They're receiving support from their district, from their charter, from the school principal, and 50% are receiving support from their colleagues. And that was really refreshing to see, even though their classrooms may not be right next door to each other anymore, they're still having those opportunities to support each other. Um, as far as the none at all category, 3% indicated that they had not received um, any support from their district or charter. So again, that might be an opportunity for improvement, as well as maybe improving the types of support that teachers are receiving from their school principal as well. And one of the questions that we were really interested in from teachers was future planning. So, if we had to close schools again, and we can see this happening in many districts in our metro area that are open and are now considering either going back to a hybrid model or going back to virtual. What are some things that we really need to have in place if this happens again? And so 56% of teachers indicated just really having a plan in place that provides students with all of the tools that they need that they would normally have in school. So if a child normally receives um, speech therapy, so having a way that we can actually do that virtually. If a child has a 504 plan in which they have additional time in taking tests or completing assignments, making sure that that's also incorporated into their virtual learning format. Um, and again, having access to like the physical and the mental health support. So how do we ensure that students still have access to free and reduced lunch? How do we make sure that the school counselors are still able to connect and check in with students to look for any behavioral or mental health issues? Also, having high quality curricular that really kind of ties in with the district standards and the state standards for distance learning, and then setting clear guidelines for teachers' roles during distance learning. Many teachers felt that they were just kind of really trying to balance things out, really trying to balance making sure their students learn what they're supposed to learn, but then also kind of balancing the social and emotional needs for their students and being flexible and having grace as much as possible. So we also asked teachers, lessons learned. What would you share with other teachers as kind of what's helped you or what have you learned along the way? And most indicated, communication is key. Communication with students and families is really important. And also recognizing this is a difficult time for everybody. So extending grace, not only to students, but to families and extending grace to themselves. Because you may not get everything right. You may not do everything right, but do as much as you can. And then also prioritizing students' social and emotional needs. Teachers have said, yes, I'd love for my students to complete this assignment, but if it means that they're going to have like an emotional breakdown or they're going to be in tears, you know what? The assignment can wait. Let's meet the student where they are. And so that requires a lot of flexibility with their instruction, being transparent. The other thing that was really important, one teacher who had experienced difficulty in terms of getting students to kind of log in on time, she mentioned that having a consistent schedule as much as possible um, and giving students the resources that they need. So encouraging students to set an alarm so that they are reminded to log into their Google meeting or their class on time. Making time for professional development and planning time. So that was a really big key for teachers. And then finding and using an existing resources. And so one of the things that came out during the focus group with teachers was just this really organic kind of co-learning that occurred, which was really phenomenal. Teachers who were struggling in one area were kind of telling us what they were experiencing, and like immediately another teacher jumped in who had that same issue and was able to help problem solve and offer ideas and suggestions. And so one of the things the teachers on the focus groups said at the end is, can we exchange contact information so that we can kind of connect and keep this dialogue going? So that could be something that's important to keep in mind as we move forward. And so next steps, I'll just kind of touch on these a little bit, and then Kim, you can sum it up, but just having those peer networks for teachers so they can continue to learn from one another, kind of identify best practices, as well as peer networks between students and families, community building. So having a community of special education teachers and other support professionals to have opportunities to connect and communicate. And then having an interdisciplinary approach, so involving teachers, therapists, coordinators, children, parents, all together to kind of meet the needs of children who are learning at home. All right. Well, so without any further ado, I will turn this back over to Kim.
Okay. Um, Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, one of the things that we thought was really striking was how much grace teachers gave families and how much grace families gave teachers. As you can see, this was not a finger pointing, a blame game session. Both the families and the teachers were committed to being in this together and to moving forward. And so as we talked about findings, we had to acknowledge that even though 2020, has been this year of COVID, that our families we were in a pandemic well before 2020. This is the most historically disenfranchised population who really has not had their civil rights movement. And so while, other marginalized, underrepresented groups have, stepped up, advocated, demanded a seat at the table, people with disabilities have not had that moment. And so when you're talking about the times that we're in, if you're already marginalized, and then you're in the middle of a socially distanced era, that exacerbates your situation to like a whole nother level. And so what we heard from teachers and from families was the real need to connect with someone just like them in their exact situation. And so that need to develop a parent to parent network was strong. And then teachers, not only special education certified teachers, but teachers who are serving students with disabilities, along with therapists and support professional, paraprofessionals as well. Those individuals who are serving students in the classroom, they need their own network. They need to be able to share experiences and what's working. One of the saddest quotes that we saw from one of the teachers was we asked teachers if they could share lessons or insights with fellow teachers. We heard some that were saying, hey, let's just focus on their well-being. We can always make up academic, deficits, but, let's sometimes that the stability that we provide will be the only stability that that child may have. So let's, be consistent. But one teacher, when we asked her that question, she said, I just don't feel very successful right now. And wow, so she's overwhelmed. Teachers are also saying that they are also being like a support um, arm for the families. The families are kind of like unloading, on them, and so there was a real need for teachers and classroom professionals to have a network to lean on, as well as families. And then with that peer-to-peer networking, a need for a formal convening, maybe an unconference of some kind, where there could be one for educators and then another one for families so that they could just share. Families could maybe share, okay, this is the schedule that's working for our family. This is from time we wake up until the time we go to bed, this is how we're making it. And then teachers might say, okay, this is how we are, making, English language makes sense. This is what we're doing on this day. These students have a role, and then on Tuesday, these students play another role. Some of that information exchanging is absolutely necessary in this time where everyone is feeling isolated and overwhelmed. Along with that, we also were hearing families say, my child has, high anxiety, high depression that has just really worsened with this. And, or my child is, it's so hard for him to even turn on the computer and to see his teacher and to see his friends, but he can't interact with them like he's used to doing. And so virtual learning turns into a meltdown because he doesn't want to see them on the screen. He wants to be in person learning like he normally does. So, in person learning is stressful for our household. So, some of the techniques that work with in person learning is there are times when, let's say, there is a behavior issue, then with in person learning, they will convene the interdisciplinary team. And so it will be everyone from maybe the SPED teacher, the regular or general ed teacher. It can be a counselor. It can be maybe even the gym teacher. Maybe there is, the speech and language teacher, therapist, and the occupational therapist. All of those support professionals, and maybe even an administrator, those individuals who know this child can say, okay, when we see this happen at school, this is the way we respond. Or when we have this happen in, this setting, this is the way we respond. So instead of just having one-on-one sessions, bringing the team together to work together with the parent to offer a solution, and then to be able to track how well that solution is, how well it's working. Once it's rolled out, do we need to tweak it? So parents were also saying we appreciate the teacher, and we appreciate the therapist, but if there were some times for them to come together and for us to kind of have an interdisciplinary approach, that will be helpful. And so those were our recommendations, that we form peer networks for families as well as for teachers and educators, as well as look at a convening for them to formal coming together and exchanging information, and then implementing like an interdisciplinary approach so that both the teachers as well as the families can come together and connect, and then look at common issues and work together to resolve them and move forward. So I know that was kind of a mouthful, and would love to hear some feedback from you all.
Kim, I will just add that with the patients that I'm working with right now through Foster Adopt Connect, so a lot of kids in the Kansas City, Missouri school district, a lot of kids really throughout the city, in Independence and Fort Osage and Lee Summit. In addition to the team that you have just kind of assembled with what you just said, I really do think if physicians or treating providers can be brought into that. One of the things that I have been doing is being more open to treating anxiety, depression right now during this time, even if it's temporary, because kids are just so overwhelmed. And many of them are doing this hybrid situation where they're home 2 days a week and they're in school 3 days a week. And I mean, I've had multiple kids. Of course, the kids I'm working with right now not only have other diagnoses, behavioral disorders, mental health disorders, ADHD, but have trauma exposure early in their lives. So
Mhm.
this is just elevating everything for them and their foster parents or adoptive parents. But I really would love if physicians or treating providers were included in that group. I've been able to do that. Of course, my schedule is much more flexible now than it was when I was at Children's Mercy all those years, but it's just been such a good experience to be a part of those Zoom meetings with the whole school team and really hear what's happening with the kids, to be able to expand my understanding of the big picture with each kid and treating anxiety disorder if necessary, even during this time. So just wanted to say, I think it's important that the treating providers are included in that, and hopefully they'd be willing to do so.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. That is helpful. And I added it to our notes. Tracy and Jennifer, just a thought. It gets so murky, between what, let's see, a child is offered through their school, and then what resources or supports are available to them through their case manager. Um, what are your thoughts as you were listening to our presentation about the needs of families and how these families can tap into maybe some of their benefits that are available maybe beyond their school services?
Well, I definitely think that it would be important that support coordinators are part of the team for the transition, um, because it's the only way you can kind of do that future planning. Services right now are on wait lists, but there's so many things that support coordinators could be referring people to and getting benefits set up and all that. But I'm not sure what the consistency is in the support coordinator being part of any kind of transition team with the schools.
Mhm. Have you been brought in to any schools so far, or working with any kids who are involved with virtual learning?
I'm sure our support coordinators have, but I have such little contact with what they do and that day-to-day operation of support coordinators. I
Okay.
definitely collect information about that probably from the support coordinators, but I don't really know anything about that currently.
Okay.
And I would say, I have worked with families, but mainly I'm working either with the ones with really young children or older, like the high school age kids. And a lot of them are really, they seem to be making do the best they can, but of course it's a challenge. And one of the things that we do refer families to is the Missouri Parent organization, and that is kind of a little bit what we're talking about, trying to get that peer support for them, just what they're going through, and trying to connect them with other parents as well. So we do that.
Hmm. Okay. And is that through Missouri Family to Family? Okay.
Yeah, so they connect parents with other parents.
Great, great, great. Cool. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts or feedback?
I had to step away for a little bit. And was there kind of a breakdown between the parents that were in Kansas City School District versus charter schools versus the outside of Kansas City? And did you see any differences there?
That's a great question. Just because the numbers were so imbalanced, it was really hard to make any comparison because there were so many charter school parents I will say in the focus group that we did see differences in the parents who were members of charter schools versus those who were in the Kansas City public schools. Most of the parents were satisfied. More of the parents in the KCPS schools indicated they had more trouble with technology support and also just kind of getting a higher rate of response from teachers and school administrators, whereas more of the parents in the charter schools indicated the teachers were really responsive in answering their questions. And so again, because the samples were so imbalanced, it's kind of hard to draw a conclusion if there's really any statistically significant difference, but that was really one of the major ones that we saw.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we had quite it was definitely an imbalanced response, but we had, seemed like a strong response from Brookside Charter.
Yes.
And those parents were very satisfied because the school had transported the children back and forth for therapy. And so they were able to, not only transport them back and forth for their speech and language and OT and PT, but also it was also kind of sharing information with home. So they were, so those parents were definitely, they gave really good feedback on how responsive the school was and how adaptive they were. But overall, all parents of whether it's school district or charter, they were so appreciative to their teachers, saying that, especially parents who are essential employees. And so, they had to be at work and maybe the child was, with grandma, during the day. And so when mom gets home, she's needing to call or reach out to the teacher after hours. And the teacher was responsive. So that was a common thread, an acknowledgement that, teachers were so available and so accommodating.
One of the other things that we heard too were like the other community supports that parents were using during this time. And so these were like boys and girls clubs had opened to allow kids to come in and have access to technology and computers that they needed. Some students were also utilizing Operation Breakthrough. So they were able to go to Operation Breakthrough to have supervision, to get some of their schoolwork done. But from the teacher's perspective, it was great that they had that supervision during the day, but sometimes the staff just kind of like not really involved in the child's curriculum. So they don't know that, oh, you've got a math test today at 1 o'clock, or they're kind of relying on the student to tell them that. And so students could more easily say, oh yeah, I've done all my assignments. But then, parents get home and it's like, no, you haven't done anything.
That never happens, right?
Oh,
Okay, that happens to me every day.
I was gonna say, we have this motto in my house. It's trust but verify. So I often have to log into my son's account and I'm like, okay, yeah, you really did what you were supposed to do.
Some things never change, whether it's virtual or in person, right?
And no matter how old they are.
So true. Well, we maybe have time for one more question or comment before we wrap up.
Another thing I was wondering about from the teachers when I saw the comment about the teacher who was concerned or wondering whether their students were eating properly and that kind of thing. I kind of relate to that and tie that to our roles a lot of times. Talking with individuals and family members and that concern and not really being able to have your may have some eyes on someone, but not in those situations, getting a little picture. And it just made me think about the concern and worry about, do I need to report something? when it's an extreme case and how to do that. And I'm wondering how that has impacted teachers as well. How to deal with that, I think, is a big concern.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was one things that teachers really struggled with, because it's almost like if a child is struggling academically, you can see it. You can either see it by them not logging into class, or you can see it in the quality of the work that they're turning in. But whether or not they had breakfast or lunch that day, they can't see that, and so they don't know. And so some teachers indicated there are some students that, you know, I worry about. I might hear things in the background on the Zoom call and I think, oh my goodness, is that, the healthiest environment? But they feel that, their hands are tied. You can't really see, bruises or, some of those markers. And then kids just don't have that freedom to actually, go into school away from parents, away from family members, and really say if something really is going wrong. So that was one thing that teachers really struggled with. Um, and it's, a lot of communities have tried to step in and offer some support. I know Children's Mercy offers free lunch. So parents and families with children, if they come in and they want a free lunch, we've been able to extend our free lunch program that we typically offer during the summer. So kind of, so in terms of like sharing resources with teachers, those kinds of resources would be helpful too, so they could communicate that to their classes, send it in emails to parents and families to make sure that everybody has that information regardless of need.
Yeah, and another thing that we heard, and I apologize for the echo, but God, this technology drives me bananas. Just does what it wants to do, right? But another thing that we heard from a parent was, again, life is unpredictable right now. And so there is a fear that a wellness person will come by or a truant officer will come by if the child doesn't log in. And let's say they're having technical issues. Let's say the child is just not having a good day. And so they don't log in. And then the families are worried, will we be, hotlined, or will we, be punished, or, or that type of thing. So and that causes another level of anxiety, that maybe there really wasn't a crisis per se, but the household, like right now, this is just not a good virtual learning moment for this household. So it was just it's pretty enlightening. And I think that the peer networking and then bringing in our clinical partners to assist would definitely go a long way to help us, because I mean, honestly, it looks like we're going to finish out the school year virtually, if not 100%, to a great degree. And who knows about next school year? We're in such an uncertain time. So, so that was a lot of work ahead, but we were just relieved to be able to get some insight from the front lines about the road ahead. I just want to thank you all for joining us today, and then also we can send out the slides from today's presentation, as well as a link to the study. It's posted on our website, and it'll give you time to dig in. And if you have any questions, or if you have any resources or thoughts, please feel free to share that with us, and we will definitely pass it on. Again, thank you all for joining us for this week's edition of Tuesday Talks. Have a wonderful day, and let's be safe and stay encouraged. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Kim. Great
You're
session.
welcome.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Okay,
Yes.
happy Thanksgiving.
Ditto.
Yes, absolutely.